on the Practical 365 show today, we're joined by Tony and Jason from Accenture. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure. And you're very lucky. We've got both Paul and myself doing the guest spot today. So for those that don't know about Accenture, and I think everybody on the planet's got to know the name Accenture at least, right, and have an idea of what it is. But for those that really sort of see all of the different areas that a massive global company works in, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what Accenture is?
Sure. Having been at Accenture now, this will be my 25th year. Tony's been here longer. It's kind of fun when I get to answer this question because through my career, it started off with, we're a global consulting company. And then it turned to, we're a global consulting and technology company. And then a global operations company. And then the world's largest digital agency. It's all of these things, and it keeps growing. The point is, it's a global company of 500,000 people that are doing all kinds of work from technology and strategy consulting to back office operations to we are the world's largest digital agency at this point. So all of that experience design and digital creative work, even video production capabilities and ad agency sort of skill sets. And everywhere in between. And that's what's fun about working in a company like Accenture is there's so many different parts of our business. We get excited to be part of the IT organization. That's Tony and I's role inside of Accenture. We support all of this diverse type of work and all the people that support it globally.
That's interesting to hear because I guess that gives a lot of insight to your consultants as well because they're seeing that lots of different industries that are very focused, but working on a company that has its as they say here, fingers in a lot of pies. Then, so and about yourselves, what do you do, Jason? What do you do, Tony? Do you want to give us a little bit of background and history to what you do at Accenture, how you got into the role that you're in today?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll turn it to Tony. I started back in our utilities practice, and I was a consultant. Doing application development and support for large utility companies and billing systems. And then through my career in all different sort of permutations, I about 5-6 years ago, got the opportunity to join our IT organization. And I viewed it as an incredible opportunity because, it's one thing to be consulting our clients on this. It's another one, a company our size, as progressive as we are in IT, to help run IT for a shop like this. And so now I play a role in our IT leadership team, all about digital experience. So I'm the digital experience lead for Accenture's IT organization. Tony.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me today. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys. As Jason said, I've been at Accenture a long time, so nearly 28 years. Started when the company was Anderson Consulting and had only about 25,000 people. I had a background in computer science, and I actually joined what then was the beginning of our internal IT organization. There were only about 30 people in the department, and I set up the first email network for us back in the Lotus Notes days and spent a lot of time supporting Novell and trying to get the company connected as we built that. And then I did a lot of different things, but mostly on the infrastructure side. And eventually I left our internal IT organization and went to our infrastructure outsourcing practice and spent a number of years helping our clients in that respect. And then came back to internal IT a few years ago. And today I lead what we call our live services organization, which is responsible for all of the systems and support that we provide to the 500,000 people at Accenture.
That's really interesting to hear. So you've went onto the consulting side and thought, actually, I want to come back and live with the technology, see what happens after it gets deployed.
Yeah, it was a good opportunity, and I've got to do a lot of different things. But running operations for this company is a wonderfully challenging but rewarding role. So I really like it.
It sounds really fascinating. One of the things you said just resonated with me. You started when you were only 25,000 people, which of course is a pretty good sized enterprise by most standards. But talk for a second, if you will, about some of the challenges you face when you go from having 50 to 100 to 500,000 plus seats. I mean, when you get ready to deploy a new technology, I'm guessing you probably don't just plop it on the table and say, right, all 500,000 of you, here you go, help yourselves. How do you make that work in such a large environment?
Yeah, I'll start that, Jason, if you want, and then you can add in anything you'd like. For us, I think there's a couple things. When we're a smaller organization, you can very much live in sort of a one-size-fits-all because you probably don't have the kind of business diversity or geographic diversity that a large enterprise has. So one of the things that's changed for us as we've gotten much bigger is we've had to understand that we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we have to figure out how we can rapidly deploy technologies that parts of our business need. As part of that, we will often move very quickly into proof of concept or pilot stage to determine if things will work for us. And I think one of the things that has gotten more difficult over the years is, of course, what you can do in some countries you can't do in others because there are different legal requirements, different data privacy requirements, et cetera. So what we've really tried to focus on is we can't be in one size fits all. There are going to be some technologies that we can deploy faster in certain geographies. Our intention will always be to design with the end in mind, which is to move the entire organization over there. But that's one of the things that I think helps us deploy quickly. So
having that end goal in mind is important then.
It is. The 2 points I would add there is we are very platform centric, in meaning we're platform first. We're 95+% in public cloud, and when a new business requirement comes our way, the first question we ask is, what of our existing platforms can we adapt for that use case? The other is that we've always had, with using those cloud platforms, we are, a principle to be browser-based in everything we do, right? So it is possible for us to move very quickly because we don't have to worry about, how this application is going to run on this, cloud or on this app, device or whatever. Everything's browser-based, and it has been forever. And then that platform-centric approach, to the extent we can be using for those cloud providers a single global tenant that might have different regions, but have a single global tenant. We talk with lots of peers in other companies and clients about just the nightmare situation they have with tenants all over the world and in multiple versions of things, and just trying to manage anything in that world. Yeah. Or where you've got thick client applications that you just can't get to the cloud for whatever reason. That becomes really challenging. And we couldn't grow the pace that Accenture is growing if we didn't have that stance, if we didn't have that architecture, if we didn't have those principles. I think it's really key to that growth.
And often those companies that do end up, I spoke to one, I won't say the exact number, but it was 50 plus tenants. And of course, they've seen the light, especially when it comes to managing security and compliance. It sounds like, whilst it could seem challenging, it's a good decision to have been able to make, even though you've got that diverse business. And you said browser-based. Now, Teams, browser-based. Teams is aimed at being that app that effectively is bringing in a lot of browser-based apps. For those like me who thought, are you using it all in the browser? How do you use together mode? Do you mean that in general, or is Teams an exception there?
Yeah, I would say in the the world that most people come from, where they're with Microsoft 365, the preference still, I'd say, is to use the thick client apps. But, Tony always likes to remind us that the college graduates are coming in with expectation that they're doing everything in the browser. There's no such thing as living in a world where they've got a thick client to, create a document or to create a PowerPoint or whatever. So, obviously the thick client of Teams, which is, probably our most consumed app, people still prefer to use the thick client because it has so much more rich functionality. But the ability to use browser-based for everything across Microsoft 365 is a huge, huge benefit. I'm more talking about like the deep business applications that people use to get work done. There's a lot of companies that still are reliant on a really old legacy client application stack that doesn't support, fast movement. Tony, what would you add to that?
No, I think you got that right. I mean, we do use the Teams thick client. I think the fact that we're largely browser-based allows us to do other things very aggressively, like stay very current on Windows operating system platforms. So we were one of the first organizations to move to Windows 10, and we stay right on the forefront of being current, both in patches and in the quarterly, the half-year releases.
That's pretty impressive given the scale of the organization that you're able to do that. I mean, do you ever have problems keeping up with the pace at which Microsoft shovels new changes into the service? So that every time do you think, oh my gosh, I wish they hadn't pushed that change just yet because we're still trying to onboard or get everybody socialized with the change they made last month?
I want Tony to start this response.
I used to think that way. And I had a former boss who used to say, if you stand still, you will be passed. I mean, I think we've acknowledged that, we're on the bicycle, that we're never, ever going to stop pedaling. And so we're very aggressive when the new patches come out and the new releases come out. We know they're going to fix things. And we, both from a security, but also add functionality. And so, we moved very early on to their service level and ring level, and things like Microsoft Office 365 come directly from Microsoft, and we're aggressive on the patching, and we think that's the way of the future. That's the way you operate in your personal life. On your phone, the updates just come to the apps on your phone, and you deal with them. And I think as your personal and business life converge, you get used to the world where the updates are pushed to you. And so that's, I think, the kinds of things that we have to do to keep pace in the enterprise. And I think if you don't do that, you're just going to end up behind on functionality and less secure.
We always say that, it's, imagine a lot of IT shops are in the world of their users are saying, please don't change anything. I just like it the way it is. Don't touch anything. Keep this version. And, think about our constituency. The people we support are, the tech consultants. They're the future. They're the ones pushing the latest stuff. So they're watching Microsoft Ignite and Build and all of these conferences. The things get announced, they want them yesterday, right? So we've got this different community of users that is embracing change. They want the latest stuff the moment they're announced, and they're a really rich source of feedback for what things they want next that we filter back to Microsoft.
So what I just heard... What I just heard was that you guys are the reason Microsoft keeps turning on new features by default, even when the MVPs tell them not to. So thanks for that. Now we know who to blame.
No, we don't love that.
That's directly Jason, I'm pretty sure.
Right. So hang on, just let me make a note here.
No, we don't. I mean, the thing that we, Tony sort of referenced it with our global nature and that the fact that there are different laws, presiding over these different countries. That the thing that we always want is more granularity of control on features and the ability. Don't start them, on by default, but allow us to sort of say, hey, this geography, we want these features. This geography, we want these features. And we do think that that is ultimately a better thing for all of us. It supports the local laws, but it also helps drive adoption when part of our population sees their colleagues in other parts of the country that have features that they don't have and say, hey, wait a minute, I want that. And then we can have a better dialogue about how we get those things turned on. But it is a process, and that I'd say is probably a challenge that most IT shops are dealing with these days is how do you work through that constant, backlog of new things that are coming out that you've got to work through a approval process, right? We legal, data privacy, info security, workers' councils, they're all part of our process now. So it's not just as simple as flip the bit and now everyone has it. It's a process. Mm-hmm. Everything is in that backlog. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges.
And one thing I do hear from enterprises, less and less these days, but I've heard it within the last week where I'm almost quoting verbatim. They said, well, we're an enterprise. We can't take the latest updates. We must be behind on these. We can't deploy them. And, we've spoken recently on the podcast to the folks from the product group who deal with the Office updates. And they said, well, people really, if they want to get those fixes, if they want the most reliable version, the fastest, most performant version, then they do need to keep as current as possible. So did you go through a journey of understanding what today was and you had to manage it and then gradual acceptance? How did that move to current work for you?
I think for us, the thing to keep in mind, and Jason commented on it earlier, is the majority of our corporate apps, so things that would affect operating systems or might have plugs into other productivity documents, are all browser-based. And so we don't have a lot of what I would consider custom macros or a lot of built-in automation into the Office products themselves. And because we're largely web-based, we can separate our connection from having to test absolutely everything in Office and Microsoft before we deploy it, because we've taken this browser-based approach. That's a process that started years ago, and before Jason and I were in our roles. But that's been just the key enabler for us, is that we don't have a lot. I mean, we are very, very dependent on Microsoft technology. We're very, very dependent on the Microsoft Productivity Suite, but we don't have an explicit tie that if they change something, it breaks something for us. And I think, if you've modernized your applications, you should be able to accept updated code from Microsoft without breaking any core business processes, is the way that I think about it.
So I'm going to reel this back to Teams, and because I know we're a bit off topic, but it's really interesting to hear. We should have booked 5 podcasts with yourselves. We'll definitely have to have you back on. So thinking about Teams, though, it would seem terrifying, I think, to most people to try and manage Teams with the admin center at such a large scale. What are some of the challenges you've had, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I'd say first thing, just to set context, the culture of Accenture from the time we were on Lotus Notes 20 odd years ago was a very highly collaborative culture. That meaning we were always engaging in some platform to get our work done. We were reliant on it at every stage. And if you took from Lotus Notes, to where we are today, our people have grown, accustomed to, they're going to do everything together as a team in some collaborative platform. We were highly consumptive on Skype for Business Minutes, and before that link, and all of the previous permutations, and it just continued with Teams, and it sort of go exponential with Teams even before COVID, and we were driving through a campaign. You're right. This is a topic in and of itself. We could do it whole our journey to Teams, but we very much were moving people over from Skype for Business in stages very early before we started to deprecate Skype for Business capabilities, so that we weren't flipping a switch of 500,000 people on this particular day that we were just going to say Skype for Business, all of a sudden your Teams. So we were over time with populations across the globe deprecating features like schedule a meeting in Outlook. That the Skype button went away and the Teams button was the only thing that was there, as an example of the way that we were bringing people over in groups. So then our IT administrators, when we finally got to that point, we were already seeing pretty parallel traffic across the two until Skype for Business just dropped. And there we were with Teams. I don't know, Tony, what you would add to that.
Well, I think in general, if you think about how you run these systems, and we now have about 1.2 billion minutes of audio a month running through our Teams tenant. So we're a single tenant across our 500,000 person enterprise. We spent a lot of time, and this did predate Teams, where we focused on what does our network look like, and what does good look like, and how do we know if we're not good. One of the problems that we'd have in our enterprise is if we had a particular office that was generating bad experience for people with, let's say that even affected 1,000 people. 1,000 people having a bad experience may not show up in the overall intergalactic metrics with 500,000 people, but we can't have 1,000 people having a bad experience. So we had spent a lot of time to understand how to manage and monitor our network. How we spent time figuring out how to take the quality scores and tie them back to particular VLANs. We spent a lot of time on how do you manage your workstations. We learned that drivers, wireless drivers, video drivers, display drivers have a big impact on Teams, and we went to things like quarterly updates, and we did that in the Skype for Business Days. So we took all those learnings that we learned from Office Communicator, Link, and Skype and applied them to Teams. when we made the move, which we did complete in December of 2019. So we were completely on Teams prior to the pandemic, thank God. And that was hugely important to us, given what ended up happening in 2020. I think, Steve, to the other point is, we invested a lot of time in understanding the call quality dashboards and those other controls. And we've automated an awful lot when it comes to provisioning in Teams, because we have different policies about how long messages can be retained for different organizations in our business, because one size doesn't fit all. And so there was just a tremendous amount of planning that went in to make sure that we could do all the things we needed to do on the back end to keep it running. So, hopefully that addresses your question. If not, happy to go deeper.
It does. So I think we've got time for one last question. I know Paul's got one burning on his lips. So, Paul.
I do, yeah. When you mention the pandemic, this is sort of the third rail. A lot of times we don't want to bring this up with guests because Lord knows everybody's tired of talking about it, thinking about it, living with it. But we're starting to see some green shoots of spring, right? Microsoft is making a lot of noise around the return to hybrid work and what that means. In their lexicon, that means everybody go out and buy Teams room systems for your physical facilities. What are you doing? And how are you thinking about what the return to hybrid work means in terms of your Teams environment and the tools that you offer people and what you're going to do to try to get that balance?
Some might call this visionary or just dumb luck. We were, pre-pandemic, we were the world's largest buyer of Surface Hubs. So we had Surface Hubs all over the place. I don't know what our current numbers are. And that strategy to have either Surface Hubs or MTRs, before MTRs came out, Hubs was the only option for us to make a Teams room system be sort of a standard. So we have been going, to deploy. We're going to open our New York Innovation Hub later this year, provided we can do that. But it will be almost wall-to-wall MTRs and Surface Hubs, and that is our belief. Is we want that experience for people. It goes back to digital experience where they seamlessly walk into the room knows it's their meeting, they're on that call, and they don't have to think about it anymore. We were already getting people used to that approach. So we do think that's an incredibly important part of how we drive that experience and that connectivity and collaboration when our people are back in offices.
Yeah, I'll just make one comment. I think for us, it's not about return to work, because I don't think we ever stop working, and I don't think we need to be in an office to work. What we want is, when people come back to our offices, we want them to be able to do things that they couldn't necessarily do at home. So we want them to be able to collaborate, work together. We also understand that the days of everybody that needs to be in a meeting physically being in that room is less likely to happen. And so what's really important is that we enable Accenture with the right kind of technologies, so that if 5 people are in the room and 2 people are remote, they feel like they're in the same room. And so those capabilities that Jason is talking about is what we were already doing before, and what we're going to continue to do, because we just don't anticipate that everybody that needs to be in that room is physically going to be together.
And that equity that you mentioned, where if you are remote or you are somebody in the room and being an equal participant, and that's the thing that's easy to get very, very wrong, I think. And if you've been remote before all of this, you'll have probably experienced it as well. So that's a really good thing to bear in mind. And we go back to your first comment about thinking about that end goal that you're going for, keeping that business outcome in mind, rather than just the tech, which could well be expensive and deployed the wrong way, fail quite badly.
Yeah, and we have to make sure that while we do have different business needs and this diversity of businesses, that no matter what office building you go to or what room you go to or who you're meeting with, they are going to have to be able to connect. And that's why it's really important for us to have a set of standards, which is the Microsoft ones that we anchor against, regardless of what business you're in, and then we figure out how to enable certain features for other special requirements.
Thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like we could go on easily for another 35 minutes, but unfortunately we don't have the time. I really do appreciate you joining us, though.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
it was fun.
Stuff, gentlemen.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Cheers.